Welcome to Ontario Cold Cases, the podcast, brought to you by Nickel Investigations, the podcast that delves deep into the unsolved mysteries that haunt our province. I'm Jay Nickel, a private investigator with Nickel Investigations, and your host and guide in this journey through the chilling tales that left investigators baffled and communities in search of answers. In each episode, we'll unearth the forgotten stories of Ontario's cold cases, exploring the details, the evidence, and the individuals involved with the eye of a private investigator who specializes in cold case investigations. From the mysterious disappearances to the perplexing murders, our mission is to shine a light in these cases and hopefully bring justice to those who have long awaited closure. But we can't do it alone. Join us as we navigate the twists and turns of these enigmatic cases. We'll speak with experts, law enforcement officials, and sometimes even the families of the victims, all in the pursuit of truth. So buckle up and prepare to dive headfirst into the world of unresolved mysteries. Together we'll keep the flame of hope burning for justice, one episode at a time. Thank you for tuning in to the Ontario Cold Cases, the podcast. Let's begin our quest for answers. Hello, and welcome to Ontario Cold Case, the podcast. Please consider subscribing on Patreon, Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcasts. Tonight's episode is Season 1, Episode 9, The Triple Slaying of the Airst Family and the Fagans. In the early morning hours of Sunday, September 30th, 1979, upper-middle-class couple Ike and Celia Airst, age 55 and 43 respectively, and their son Avrom, 22, were viciously bludgeoned to death in their mid-Toronto home on the southwest corner of Glencairn and Dewbourne Avenues. At the time, the area was part of a separate city called North York. The Airst married daughter, Simi, found 3 bodies at 1 p.m. on Sunday when she came to visit. She ran across the street to tell neighbors. The Airst had somewhat controversial histories. Ike owned 31 commercial buildings in the city, including one that housed a gay bathhouse, which brought him some unwanted attention in 1977 after a boy was murdered by pedophiles in a seedy downtown body rub parlor. Additionally, in 1965, he and his brother had been publicly accused of being slumlords. Most of the Airst holdings were small factories, businesses, and shops, with a sprinkling of private homes, and one of the properties was a drop-in center for psychiatric patients operated by a nun. However, friends and people who knew him from his work doing repairs on his various properties said he was a hard-working, kind man. Celia was an ardent member of the Jewish Defense League and had gained some notoriety in 1971 for heckling visiting Soviet Premier Alexei Kazygin in the name of her cause. Celia was also active for years in a Jewish Holocaust committee, trying to persuade the Canadian government to act against alleged war criminals who participated in the persecution and killing of Jews. Avrom lived at home with his parents and assisted his father with his maintenance work. A neighbor said the family was very private and kept early hours. Ike had suffered several strokes and had a heart attack in recent years and was thus not in fulsome health. This episode is being brought to you by Nickel Investigations. The investigation. Based on the daughter's statements and the layout of the crime scene, police believe the crime transpired as follows. On Sunday evening, Celia and Avrom went out for dinner and drinks with Simi and her husband. Ike decided to stay home and watch a baseball game. After enjoying dinner at Inn in the Park in the city's East End, Avrom wanted to go home to tend to his father, who had a pacemaker. He was driven home, and then his mother left again with her daughter and son-in-law for drinks in a stroll in the Yorkville district. At almost 1:30 a.m., Celia was dropped off at her house. It was a foggy night. Police speculate she entered the house and locked the door, but opened it again when she heard a knock, perhaps thinking it was her daughter. There was no sign of forcible entry. She was immediately fatally attacked with a blunt instrument, and then the killers went upstairs and killed Ike and Avrom in their bedrooms in the same manner. Celia's body was found in the front hall, the men's upstairs. The crime scene was saturated with blood. Some reports say Celia had also been stabbed in the back. Clearly the killer or killers had to move quickly in case the two men upstairs had heard anything. Up the 8 stairs in the living room of the backsplit house, any sounds were muffled by the thick shag pile carpeting. At another 8 stairs and along the hallway to the second door on the left, Avrom's room. He stood no chance. His head was beaten to a pulp as he slept, the pale blue walls and ceiling splattered by the blood. Just 4 more steps along the hallway into the master bedroom. Ike heard nothing and suffered the same fate as his son. No weapon was found at the scene. There was no evidence of forced entry, and police determined it was unlikely that Celia would have opened the door to a stranger. Friends and business associates said the Airsts were almost reclusive and wouldn't have let a stranger in. The house had an intercom at the front door and the Airsts could ask who was calling. It's also possible, police said, that Mrs. Airst was surprised by an attacker who followed her home late Saturday night. They also believed there may have been more than one killer. Robbery was ruled out as a motive since nothing was taken. According to police, $5,000 in cash was found in the house and there were no signs of ransacking. On the dresser beside Ike's bed was his wallet with $1,000 in cash inside. The Airst bloodbath looks much like the Fagans to ignore the similarities, a former homicide investigator involved in the Fagan case said. In both cases, there was massive overkill. The suspects. Although police probed possible political grievances or anti-Semitism as motives for the murders, no connections were ever established, nor was a link found to Ike's business dealings. That was the work of a crank or psychopath was also eliminated. Police feel the deaths were too well planned and too professionally carried out. Rumors suggested the mafia had wanted to buy a number of the Yonge Street strip properties and Ike had told them to get lost. Police investigated every one of the properties and every possible deal related to them. They also ruled out a business deal that had soured. Next, the police investigated the political angle. The exhaustive police investigation went deep into the possibility of the deaths being caused by militant neo-Nazis. But the police intelligence network showed the killings were not the work of any such groups. That left police with Celia's passion, her fight against communism for Soviet Jewry. Nothing came of this either. According to the Toronto Star, there were also gangs of youth who cheered sarcastically when police drove steel stakes into the perimeter of the Airst lawn and roped it off to fence off spectators. Was it just directed at the police, or did they have problems with the Airst themselves? And police could apparently neither confirm nor dispel theories that this crime is related to the nearby murder of an elderly couple, Harold and Florence Fagan, in 1978. Almost 30 years later, the Airst family murders remain unsolved. My theory. This episode is brought to you by Nickel Investigations. From what is publicly known, police didn't make much headway in searching for suspects, but this is almost assuredly not a random crime. The question I have is why the bludgeoning of Celia in the front hall didn't rouse the men upstairs from their sleep. It probably made quite a racket. Maybe the killer or killers were in the house already, and had killed Ike and Avrom when Celia arrived home. He would have had to be in the house before to move quick enough directly to the bedrooms. The order of the murders wasn't immediately clear, and I'm still not convinced of what the police seem to believe. The men were bludgeoned to death upstairs in their bedrooms. Celia Airst was bludgeoned and stabbed in the back just inside the front door. Were the men killed first in the bedrooms? Was Celia walking in on the crime? Or was Celia killed first, the attackers moving quickly so that the Airst men didn't hear the noise and come downstairs? It also doesn't sound like a professional hit. Beating someone to death, especially 3 people, would not be quick enough and far too bloody. There's no way the murderer or murderers would have been able to leave without being covered in blood themselves. This seems to be a very personal attack. Could there be a family problem or inheritance as a motive? There is the rather unusual way the evening unfolded as well. Driving the brother home, then the daughter going out separately with the mother. It did ensure that each family member was home alone or arrived home separately. Both the Airst and Fagan cases have a remaining offspring, a daughter in each case, and presumably a beneficiary. Nowhere does it mention if and how the daughters were ruled out on and why. Unless there was another unmentioned sibling, guessing that Simi was the sole beneficiary and inherited a substantial legacy as a result of the murders. I don't think she was involved, however. Harold and Florence Fagan. On Monday, March 6, 1978, Harold and Florence Fagan, 63 and 62 respectively, were found shot to death in their home on Dewbourne Avenue near Bathurst Street and Eglinton Avenue West in Toronto. Their chauffeur found their bodies when he came to pick up Mr. Fagan at 8:30 a.m. They were believed to have been killed late Sunday the 5th. They were last known to be alive at 8 p.m. Sunday when their daughter telephoned. Harold was a well-known, well-liked entrepreneur and concession stand owner at the Canadian National Exhibition, and police believe the killer's motive was robbery and that he was familiar to the victims. The Fagans were reported to have kept $500 in their house, and police theorized the killer thought he would find more cash. Harold was president of International Concessions, a company that has long sold novelties and souvenirs to concessionaires at the Canadian National Exhibition and other Ontario fairs. Harold Fagan owned Half Beat Harold's Record Bar on Granby Street off of Yonge, as well as Fish and Chips Restaurant in Riverdale Park. A year and a half later, the triple murder of the Airst family brought renewed interest to the murder of the Fagans because of the superficial similarities between the two crimes. Both sets of victims lived in the same area, about 1.5 kilometers apart, were well off and were prominent members of the Toronto Jewish community. This episode is brought to you by Nickel Investigations, The Investigation. The Fagans were gunned down at point-blank range in their Dewbourne Avenue home. Harold was shot once in the chest and head, and his wife once in the head. Police said their home may have been ransacked to make it look more like a robbery gone wrong. Less than $1,000 was taken. According to the chauffeur who found the bodies, on the living room floor was all the contents of the cupboards. He was trusted by the Fagans and had a key to the house. He entered when after his arrival and honking the car horn. Nobody from the house acknowledged he was there. I looked in the kitchen where Mr. Fagan kept his money in a toolbox. It was emptied. I know there was about $500 in there on Sunday night because we'd been working at the Dufferin Flea Market, and I drove him home around 5 p.m. I looked in the bedroom and everything was thrown all over the bed. I went to the exercise room, which Mr. Fagan always used. Nothing in the bathroom. I knew there was something in Mrs. Fagan's sewing room. I pushed open the door slowly and saw a hand. Mrs. Fagan was on the floor and Mr. Fagan was on the bed. They were both dead. At first, detectives believed the two had been stabbed by an ice pick found beside the bodies, until an autopsy showed both had been shot dead. Although the Fagan home was ransacked, detectives are still puzzled why there was no sign of a break-in. They believe the Fagans either knew the killer or were held at gunpoint as soon as they answered the door. The last time they were known to be alive was 8 p.m. on Sunday when their daughter phoned. The Fagans' home had been the target of several break-ins because of the money he kept there. Friends had said Harold had learned his lesson and not been taking home receipts. It seemed like massive overkill, just like the Airst, since they were no match for an intruder with a handgun. The suspects. The house had been ransacked, but there didn't appear to be forced entry. Police initially believed the slayings were burglary gone awry, but they soon changed their tune. One of the Fagans' business ventures was carnivals, and he was well known for running concession stands at the CNE. Police now believe these business dealings were connected to the murders. We think there was some disagreement with some carnival people in Montreal, Smith said, adding that Quebec wasn't part of Fagan's territory and his rivals took umbrage. After ruling out robbery as the motive in the Airst family murders, police began to speculate the murders were related and may have been politically motivated. The same person or persons who killed the Fagans, homicide files suggest, may have killed the Airst, and police believe both families may have known their killers. My theory: in both cases, there were no signs of forced entry. In both cases, there were suspicions that the victims might have known their attacker or attackers. How else could the killer get inside? There was a major difference between the Airst and Fagan murders. There was something methodical about the Airst family killings, while the Fagan killer or killers seemed to have been in a major hurry. Nothing appeared disturbed in the Airst residence. Investigators wondered if anti-Semitism was involved in the Airst murders. The family had been slain on the eve of Yom Kippur, the Jewish Day of Atonement. Celia was active for Jewish causes and had worked for the Holocaust Committee and for a couple of years with the Jewish Defense League. She was active in many charitable causes, Rabbi David Monson of Beth Shalom Synagogue told the Star. She was also always taking interest in good causes. Eventually, police grew to think the cases weren't connected, despite any outward similarities. We do not consider the two cases linked, Acting Detective Sergeant Stephen Smith of the Toronto Police Cold Case Squad said in an email. As for possible motives, they are tenuous at best, but it is believed that Fagan case was directly related to Mr. Fagan's business dealings, while the Airst case appears to be more of a robbery scenario, Smith said. Yet there was no robbery in the Airst murders. Certainly in the Airst case, I feel the police are way off. Massive overkill and beating an entire family to death seems very personal, along with the fact there was no robbery. One thing that seems the same in both the Airst and Fagan murders was no forced entry. Sure seems like in both cases the victims also knew their killer or killers. So thank you for listening, and please consider donating to our GoFundMe page. And please subscribe to Ontario Cold Cases, the podcast, on Patreon, Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcasts.